I'm here to welcome you on behalf of the Blowing Rock Civic Association. My name is Tim Gupton. I'm the president of the organization. And in cooperation with the Blowing Rock Country Club, we were able to put this event together, and we really thank you for coming today. We need to recognize and should recognize our special guests that are here. Our town council everyone's here, almost everyone is here. Mayor Sellers is here, David Harwood, Virginia Powell, Sue Sweeting, Albert Yant. Raise your hand. Thank you for coming and being interested in knowing what the community is wanting to hear and listening to them. Doug's granddaughter was having a birthday today, 16th birthday, so he gets a bye I'll get him up to speed later. We also have three important guests from the hospital system. We have the CEO, Chuck Mantooth, Amy Crabb, and Rob Hutsmith, who's the director for giving, I guess, and development. And the hospital is key to all of this because of the interrelationship between emergency services and the hospital. So we're real thankful that they were willing to be with us today. And we also have a number of our board members. We're fortunate to have about 20 really dedicated board members who give us guidance and give me advice on what direction we should take. And so we're really appreciative of our board members and their service. So I got a couple of new announcements. I'm really excited to share this one. We have decided as a board to conduct a search for an executive director. The scope of work is more than we can do as volunteers, and so we believe that it's important to add some depth to our day-to-day coverage. And so we've agreed, and we're going to commence that process now and hopefully hire someone before the end of the year. So if you know someone, and I'll share the job description by post next week, if you know someone that loves Blowing Rock, is passionate about Blowing Rock issues, and would like to serve the community in a paid position, just let us know. We really are looking forward to that. We're fortunate that that part of that funding will be covered as well. We have a grant from the Broyhill Foundation to help transition the funding, and we have another application pending that we think we'll also receive. So that's really important, big news, next step. Hopefully we'll be able to make that happen. Second thing, we opened up membership or sponsorship to the corporate community this year, and somewhat surprisingly, it was well received. Our first corporate sponsor is Chatola, and since then we've been able to add Green Park Inn, Maurice Williams from Sotheby's, and a few others in the queue to add to our sponsorship funding. So with that and your support as members of the Civic Association, we're very fortunate to be able to move and fund the organization going forward. So those are our two announcements. I want to thank Ron Curtis and the Blowing Rock Country Club staff for helping us put on this event. They were very accommodating, and we appreciate the help that they've given us. And like most things, an event like this doesn't happen without the help of some people who make it happen. So Gene Kitchen and Betsy Wilcox really kind of made everything work. So I want to thank them, of course. And our speakers today, Mayor Sellers and Shane Fox, our town manager, we obviously are appreciative for them taking the time to do their homework and share an update with you. So the question is kind of like, well, why are we here? And so last summer, we started looking into what I learned later was a 40-year quest to have a 24/7 ambulance in Blowing Rock. And most of us don't quite understand. I didn't understand the different systems that support our ambulance service, and Shane will explain that to us. So our goal was to raise public awareness. We wrote letters to the county commission, to the Watauga Democrat, to the High Country Press, and that resulted in some press coverage. Ron Curtis, Will Miller, and I met with Chairman John Welsh to talk about the need. And then we followed up with a commissioning an independent report by an outside consultant to really explain in detail the ambulance services that we have in the county. And that report is on our website if you're interested in reading that, probably 30-page report. And then we began a process of encouraging the town council to update their resolution, which they did, and that has resulted in some negotiations between the town and the county. So hopefully today, our goal is to update you as a community and help you understand the risk and perhaps the next steps to solving this need that we have for our community. So that's really all I have to share, and I'm pleased to hand the microphone over to our mayor, Charlie Sellers, who will introduce the topic and introduce Shane Fox.
I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the BRCA, the Blowing Rock Country Club for hosting this. I want to thank all of you. This is not only about our town, but it's about our community and our county. I want to thank, Chuck from the hospital, Rob, Amy. I mean, you guys are frontline, and thank you for all that you do for our community. I would assume everybody here is a taxpayer in Watauga County, correct? Taxpayer in Blowing Rock? Okay. Most of us are. And back in 2015, when I ran for office the first time, part of my platform was ambulance transport for Blowing Rock. 2017 was the same. 2019, wow, here we are. COVID really opened our eyes because our paramedics, which are second to none, were given a stipulation by the county that they could only make calls on those drastic calls. I think they're called Delta or something of this nature, where you're having a stroke or whatever. So then we had to rely on Watauga medics. Well, that opened up the issues of the timeline it took for people to get here, so on and so forth. So it opened up the eyes. BRCA and many others started asking questions, and of which we did have some answers, some we didn't. Our first responders, keep in mind, are supposed to be the first ones on the scene when there's a 911 call. Right now, Watauga Transport will transport once our people stabilize. Shane will go into more detail for you. Also, we must keep in mind, we are not the Blowing Rock Fire Department. We are the Blowing Rock Fire District. Blowing Rock has 1,300 permanent residents, in which this time of year we swell to 4,000 or 5,000, not including our tourists. The fire district spans, I think it's 50-some square miles, which triples our population. But Blowing Rock Fire District is responsible for that for Watauga County. This is a Watauga County issue. We must keep that in mind. And Watauga Medics has 3, I think now 4 units, all of which are housed in Boone at this time. Fosco doesn't have a rescue. Deep Gap doesn't have a rescue. I believe Deep Gap is getting one. Beach Mountain, nope. Seven Devils, no. So this is not only a Blowing Rock issue, but it's going to take people like yourselves to come forward to push this with the county before we're going to see any changes. Now, that being said, I am horrible with numbers. So I am deferring to someone that's good with the numbers, Shane Fox, our town manager. Thank you.
Go back up. Perfect. We good? Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'll start out by saying I am Shane Fox. I'm the town manager here in Blowing Rock. I've been here for over 2 years now. Sometimes that feels like 2 months. Sometimes it feels like 10 years. So it just depends on the day of which. But I think many of the faces I know in the crowd I've had a chance to meet in the last couple of years. And just thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Thank you to the Blowing Rock Civic Association for putting this on. Thank you to the Country Club for obviously hosting us and putting everything here together in such a wonderful venue. My first time here, so beautiful fountain and beautiful venue that I was unaware even existed. I'd taken a left before to go to Miss Powell's house, but had never taken a right, so didn't know what was down here. But the Blowing Rock ambulance issue, we'll call it, really has been in place since 1974. So the Blowing Rock Town Council in 1974 put together a resolution and sent it to the Watauga County Commissioners at that time asking for a full-fledged ambulance service to be housed in Blowing Rock. That's back where our police station is now, the old fire station. Many of you know where that is. At that time was not only a fire station but a rescue squad as well, and that request was made. So 47 years ago, that original request was made to the Watauga County Commissioners. And if you go back and read the resolution, not a lot's changed in 47 years in the language that the resolution stated. It stated that Blowing Rock was a fairly small town, a good percentage of the winter, but then in the spring and the summer and the fall, the population swelled with seasonal residents and tourists. And Blowing Rock commissioners at that time, or council members, felt like there was a need for a full-fledged 24/7 ambulance service to be provided to Blowing Rock. And so here we are 47 years later, standing here and talking about the same issue. Just a few months ago, our council was able to put together an updated resolution. We had a special meeting, and at that meeting we talked about a number of things in regards to what options there could be for an ambulance service, and overall updated that general consensus that was passed 47 years ago that we still feel like we need an ambulance service in Blowing Rock. So I'll try to answer questions tonight and give you a summary. I know I want to spend some time, or a good amount of time at least, answering your questions, because I know there's probably plenty of them out there. So a lot of the questions that are county related I may not be able to answer, but from an overall standpoint, we'll start at the beginning of why is the county involved, so to speak. So North Carolina general statutes passed many decades ago. General Statute 153 places the burden of ambulance services on the 100 counties. Not the towns, not the cities, not the rescue squads, but the counties. So all 100 counties are charged with the exact same thing, which is providing an ambulance services to the taxpayers and the citizens and the tourists within the county. From there, it's a real vague general statute. Doesn't give a lot of detail about how that should be provided. It does give options of how a county can provide that service. Not necessarily the service level, but how it can be provided. It can be done by a county itself, which is probably overwhelming majority of the counties in North Carolina provide their own ambulance service, which means they have a department that is an EMS department that provides that service. Before coming here, I was at Cleveland County, and at Cleveland County, we had a county-ran ambulance service, EMS service. Another option that you see quite frequently and what we have here is a private service, a contract service. Watauga Medics is who the Watauga County contracts with. I think they're in year 22 of that relationship, and Craig Sullivan is the CEO and president of Watauga Medics. That's a for-profit entity that has a contract with Watauga County to provide ambulance services throughout the entire county. In other places, you still see rescue squads. Rescue squads have somewhat started dying off over the last few decades. There still is a Watauga rescue squad here within Watauga County. But overall, again, the county itself is who's charged with providing that service. So many years ago, the rescue squads were able to supplement the service quite frequently. And most counties had a number of rescue squads. Your larger counties may have had one in each one of the communities. Again, going back to Cleveland, we still had 3 rescue squads still in place when I left. And so rescue squads were able to transport through a franchise agreement with the county. And that was something that was in place and has been in place, again, for many decades across the state. And these rescue squads were able to be approved by the county commissioners to provide transport. So when a rescue squad was able to arrive in a rural area, they were able, by a franchise agreement, to put someone in the back of that ambulance and take them to the hospital. They didn't necessarily have to wait on the county-ran service or a private service to arrive. And so the county has many options, is what I'm trying to get at. The county can do things, like I said, from in-house to out of the house or contracted services. The county can also utilize franchise agreements with rescue squads or other fire departments. Again, it all is being charged at the county level. And so the county itself and the county commissioners are really who's responsible for ultimately passing or allowing for these things to take place. So I've heard questions since I've been here, and I know these questions go back even well before my time, is why can't the town of Blowing Rock provide an ambulance service to its citizens? Well, simply we're not allowed to. So for us to be allowed to, we would have to petition by resolution the Watauga County Commissioners, and the Watauga County Commissioners would then have to approve that resolution. That was essentially what a big majority of our special meeting was with our town council, was discussing what options could we potentially have, or what could we do that would force the issue essentially and allow for the town to move forward with having its own ambulance service if the county wasn't going to provide that service to us. And so those options are still on the table. We have had some discussions and negotiations with the county about some different potential options of them providing that service, and the town potentially paying for that. So that's been out there. But so going back to 1974 and that original resolution to today, we're still really in the same place as we were before. And I wanted to kind of lay the land a little bit, or lay put a little of the lay of the land out there, so to speak, about why the county is important here, why the county has to be involved in this conversation, because ultimately the county has to approve. So Watauga Medics is currently the contracted agency within Watauga County and has been for 22 years, as I mentioned. There's currently 4 24/7 trucks within Watauga County. 3 are housed in Boone, Mayor. 1 is on the west end of the county at 421 and 321, just beyond Skate Land, out if you've ever been to that end of the county, out towards the Bethel area. And so right now, for all of Watauga County, there are 4 24/7 ambulance services to cover the entire county. There's 1 9-hour truck Monday through Friday that's currently housed in Blowing Rock. And so I can't give you the exact year in which that truck came over. It's been in the last 2 or 3 years. The Watauga County Commissioners allowed that truck to come over. And I say allowed, that truck was originally placed at one of the Boone bases. So this isn't a new truck, and it wasn't a new truck. It was just allowed to be stationed here Monday through Friday for approximately 9 hours each day. The issue that we've had is that truck is also what I would call, and what we use the term convalescence. That's a truck that's utilized to transport individuals in need of medical care, routine medical care, not acute, but these are individuals from, say, Foley and some of the nursing homes that have medical appointments, not only at Watauga Medical, but maybe at Baptist or at Charlotte as well. So I say all this to say the 9-hour truck that is stationed at Station 1 in Blowing Rock isn't there 9 hours. It's utilized for other purposes throughout Watauga County, most notably these convalescent services. We're grateful for the service we have, the 9 hours, or the approximate 9 hours the truck is there, because it does provide some redundancy within the system that we have. And I think it's important to give a few minutes here to talk about the Blowing Rock Fire District and the fire rescue service that we have in place, because it's unlike anything that I've ever seen, and I think it's unlike what you'll see anywhere else. So dating back to 1923, the Blowing Rock Fire Department was established by a group of volunteers at that time that felt like Blowing Rock needed a fire service. And so we're now almost 100 years, 98 years, since that original establishment of the fire department. In 1974, the same year that the resolution was passed asking for the ambulance service, Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue Blowing Rock Rescue was established. So at that point, you had a fire department and a rescue service, both housed in the same station, both housed there on Park Avenue in Blowing Rock. And your rescue service was providing your rescue first responder services along with your fire department itself. And in 2009, those two entities merged together. So it's been about 12 years now that those two entities merged together to create the Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue District. And that district has 3 stations total. The one you all see the most is the big, beautiful station on 321. That's called Station 1. Station 2 is out 221 as you're heading to Grandfather. And then the newest station is Station 3, which is at the corner of Aho Road and the Blue Ridge Parkway. So the district itself has 3 fire departments. All three are fully manned. All three have full staff 24/7. Station 2 and 3, your outlying stations, have one fully staffed individual 24/7. Station 2 has 2 at all times, sometimes 3, depending on the time of day or the time of week and the time of year. But at least 2 full staffed individuals are at Station 1 24/7, sometimes 3. That does not include your fire chief or your assistant fire chief, who are essentially on call in Blowing Rock 24/7. Those are 2 more additional individuals that are a part of that program. So if you look at the Blowing Rock Fire District, as the mayor said, it's 54 square miles between those 3 stations. The town of Blowing Rock is about 8 square miles if you take the full ETJ and town limits. And so there's a large area outside of the town limits that fire district covers. And the reason I'm going through these details, and if I'm boring you, I apologize, is to let you know that this is a large area that the fire district's being asked to maintain. The same firefighters that are at Station 1 also work at Station 2 and Station 3. There's a rotating schedule among those individuals. So in total, there's 14 full-time firefighters that are stationed in all 3 of those locations. So the town of Blowing Rock reached an agreement. Leave it there. So the town of Blowing Rock reached an agreement with the district. So the district is a separate entity. It's a nonprofit 501c3 that is a separate entity. And the town reached an agreement many, many years ago, as this creation was coming about around 2009, that the town would pay for the personnel, total personnel, which is 14 at this time, if the district itself would be responsible for not only building the buildings outside of the town, but purchasing all the equipment. So the town of Blowing Rock pays the personnel that are stationed not only at Station 1, Station 2, and Station 3. In return, the fire district pays back to the town those individuals that are outside of the town limits. So essentially, when you talk about the fire department and what you see at Station 1, the town of Blowing Rock, which you all are residents of, paid for the building that's located there, and they pay for the staff. We do not pay for the equipment. We do not pay for their apparatus. We do not pay for the turnout gear. All that's being handled by the district. The district is mainly funded through property taxes that are paid by individuals that live outside of the town limits. You as town residents do not pay for those district taxes. You pay a town tax and a county tax. If you live in the district, you pay a county tax and you pay this additional fire tax as well. And so when you talk about the district is primarily funded through those property taxes in the district, along with that additional fire tax that are charged out there. So it's convoluted, to say the least, when you start breaking it down. And I didn't mention the fact that we're in 2 counties. So you have Caldwell County and Watauga County. So I mentioned earlier the Watauga County portion of us working with them or asking, for help for the last 47 years. You also have, and many of you, including the mayor and others, have a Caldwell tax bill that you pay. Now, Caldwell County is a whole separate entity and a whole separate animal, so to speak. So many of you have seen the Blowing Rock ambulance that's stationed at Station 1. It has Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue on the side of it. And if you have been at the Green Park Inn or Green Hill or out towards Rock Road and Gideon Ridge, you may have been serviced by that ambulance. Or if you've been off of the mountain, you may have been serviced by the ambulance. That ambulance is actually there because of Caldwell County, not Watauga County. And so I think there's a lot of confusion that if there's an ambulance sitting at Station 1 in Watauga County, in Blowing Rock, why can't that ambulance come and pick me up if I need transportation? And that's a great question. And the answer to that question is because that's a Caldwell ambulance. Caldwell County realized many years ago that they couldn't accurately and efficiently service the upper end of Caldwell County. It's hard to get to from Lenoir and from their main areas. And so they petitioned Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue District with an agreement and a deal that if they were to provide additional tax dollars from Caldwell County residents that live in the area, in the district, would Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue provide transportation services. At the time, Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue District was starting to onboard more and more paramedic level individuals as well. So firefighters first, but paramedics as well, which is the highest level of individuals that you can have arriving on scene in a transportation arrangement. And so the Blowing Rock Fire District agreed to that and purchased an ambulance that is essentially being paid for out of Caldwell County tax dollars. And the agreement was for Caldwell County residents and Caldwell County incidents that take place within Caldwell County, that Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue would respond to those incidents, and that they would transport those individuals down to Caldwell Memorial Hospital. So next question would be, most logically, well, can't that ambulance pick up individuals within the town of Blowing Rock and take them to Watauga? So we go back to the county commissioners. The answer is no. So the Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue District does not have an agreement to do so. They've not also received compensation to do so. So there's two separate entities between Caldwell and Watauga as well. Watauga County doesn't also allow for transportation to be done outside of the current contract, which is with Watauga Medics. So adding another layer, and again, I apologize, I'm just trying to do the best that I can to try to explain this. Watauga County and Caldwell County and every county in the state has a medical director that oversees the transportation or medical side of things for the ambulance services or for the transportation services. And so you also have that aspect as well. So you have two different doctors essentially providing oversight, one in Caldwell and one in Watauga. And so there's many, many different things here at play that allows for the confusion and for the questions to take place. And when I first came in, I think I thought I had a good understanding, I should say, of the complexities until you really start getting into it and realizing no wonder this thing has taken as long as it has really to come to a head. And I think that's kind of where we are at this point, because it is a very convoluted and complex situation. So now, went as far as saying we have the Caldwell side and the Watauga side as well. So those are two different aspects as well. So let's go back to our Blowing Rock piece, the town piece, I should say. So Station 1 is a town building. So the town of Blowing Rock and the taxpayers, you all, fund that building. And we also fund the personnel within that building. I mentioned earlier we don't own the equipment, we don't own the apparatus, etc. But we do own the building, and we do fund the individuals in that building. Of the 14 personnel that I mentioned earlier, 11 of those 14 are full-fledged paramedics. That is unheard of. There are fire departments within this county and fire departments across the state and across this country that don't have a single paramedic within the firehouse itself. Most of those are because of the fact that you have paramedics within the transportation arrangement, the medic services or the county services that are full-fledged paramedics. So many, many years ago, and I can't tell you the number of years the first paramedic was hired, and it may have been Kent Graham, perhaps, who's the chief at this point. But Watauga County had made it known, I guess, at that point that full-fledged ambulance services wasn't coming to Blowing Rock. And so the initiative began that as firefighters were being hired in Blowing Rock, either they were going to hire firefighters for the town, in the town limits, that were full-fledged paramedics or that were willing to become paramedics. And so the 14 individuals that are paid for out of your tax dollars, 11 of those are paramedics, which is the highest level of training you can get. So when Watauga Medics shows up, or if you're in Mecklenburg County or wherever you may be and an ambulance shows up, the highest level of care you're getting is from a paramedic. The other three individuals are actual basic EMTs, and so they're qualified as well, more so than you'll find any other firehouse, again, across this state and probably across this country. So of our 14 individuals that we pay for, that you all pay for, I should say, all 14 of them are as highly qualified as you'll find. I've never seen anything like it. And the reason for that is because there was a need that was presented 47 years ago, and a need that continues to this day, to provide the very best coverage and very best care for you all and for our tourists that have medical needs. So when a Blowing Rock Fire Department truck, engine, or ladder, or a pickup truck shows up, there's a 11 out of 14 chance that individual is a paramedic. And more than likely, given the fact that we only staff at least we always staff at least one paramedic on each shift, you're going to get a paramedic level service. And so the town of Blowing Rock has taken it upon themselves, along with the chief, not only Chief Graham, but Chief Matheson before that, to put together truly the very best coverage that you can. The issue comes in, and I know you have questions on this, the issue comes in, well, so as a medical need arises, 911 is called, and that 911 call goes through the county dispatch, and it comes over to Station 1, and Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue arrives on scene on average in under 7 minutes, which is important to note. As that truck or engine or ladder arrives on scene and the paramedic is there for that car accident or that cardiac event or that stroke incident or whatever the case may be, again, you're getting the very best acute care that you can get within any area that I've ever seen. The issue arises at the transportation level, and that's where a lot of you that have had unfortunate incidents may have seen that we may arrive there very quickly, but it takes the ambulance or the transport service an extra few minutes or maybe longer depending on where you may be. And so for certain things like a stroke incident or cardiac, time is of the essence. And I know the hospital is here and they can definitely speak on that. The number one goal is obviously to stabilize a patient as quickly as we can stabilize them. But the number two goal, and it doesn't fall far behind, is to get them to the hospital as quickly as possible. If it's a stroke incident, there's not a medication that can be administered within the field without having proper scans done at the hospital. And so we, as Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue or Watauga Medics, never want to put something in a situation that could worsen the condition of the patient. So number one goal is to obviously stabilize that individual. And then number two, very, very soon thereafter, is to get them to the hospital as soon as possible to let the real professionals, the doctors, the surgeons, etc., put together the plan of care that they need. And so our number one goal, obviously, is to one, arrive on scene as quickly as possible at Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue and provide the very best acute care that we can with paramedic level services. There are a medication that we can administer. If it's a cardiac event and things of that nature, we do have the same medication with us that Watauga Medics have. The issue arises that we can't then transport you onto the hospital. And so transportation has been the biggest issue that has been talked about over the last 47 years. Early on, it was transportation and qualified individuals. Over the last 47 years, the town council and the Blowing Rock Fire District has put together such a well-oiled machine that now you have qualified individuals providing that acute care, but we still don't have the ability to transport you. And so the reason this keeps coming up, and the reason I think it came up the most in the last, say, 12 to 18 months, was because of COVID. And it was alluded to earlier that there were some changes made. Early on, the Watauga County, and Watauga County was very similar to a lot of other counties in the state that put together COVID protocols. And number one goal for them, obviously, was patient care, but number two was they didn't want to spread or transmit the COVID disease any more than they had to. So the number one thing that counties were doing across the state, and this was not across just this state, but other states as well, was trying to limit personnel on scene. And so in the world of dispatch, so when 911 calls come in, you have a dispatcher that's answering that call, and that dispatcher is listening to the call and asking questions, and they're looking to put together what type of call is it. Alpha being the least emergent call all the way to Echo. So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo. So when you get to Delta, Echo, you're really into life-saving type calls at this point, cardiac, stroke, car accidents. So under COVID protocols, Watauga County Emergency Management Services or Emergency Management Department, again, similar to Caldwell and others, limited to the number of personnel on scenes. And so what that meant was that if it was an Alpha, Bravo, Charlie call, they were only allowing Watauga medics to respond to those scenes, not first responders. And so when this started really coming to a head and I started getting more phone calls and the mayor and the council and Tim and others, was when those Alpha, Bravo, Charlie calls started coming in, whether that's a slip and fall or a cut or something like that. Watauga Dispatch was no longer dispatching Station 1 or Station 2 or Station 3 at Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue. The phone wasn't ringing. So we were sitting there, cleaning the trucks or cleaning the house or whatever we were doing, and the phones weren't ringing anymore. And the phones were ringing at Watauga Medics, which at that point they were 3, almost 4, 24/7 crews for the whole county. And it really started shining a light on the fact that there was an issue here, that it was maybe 15 or 20 minutes perhaps for an ambulance to get there. And so what you didn't have that you had for decades was the fire truck from Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue showing up. And I say all this to say, we're not perfect. We've made mistakes. Obviously, we haven't arrived every time, within 7 minutes. But overall, our average has been 7 minutes, about 6:57 for all of our medical calls and fire calls. And so we felt pretty good about that. When that went away, and Watauga Medics was the one answering the calls, I think they found themselves, and I think admittedly, somewhat understaffed and really unprepared for that. And so COVID really shed a light on this discussion that we're having today and have been having now, for the last, say, 15 to 18 months. And it was interesting to hear from council members and others that have been around for a number of years, including Mr. Matheson, who had been chief, that these conversations have been happening for decades. And they had been seeing that as being the ones on the scene. They had been seeing these issues. It was just now kind of coming to a light. And so I want to talk, wanted to talk a few minutes about the COVID issue and how that really, I think, kind of really put that big spotlight on there. Our phone stopped ringing for those calls. And so we still were coming to those Delta Echo calls. They still were dispatching us. And I say we, if you're in Meat Camp or if you're in Fosco or if you're in Beach Mountain, and they have similar fire departments, not as well trained, nowhere close to being as well trained as what we have here. Same thing for them. They weren't getting those same type of calls. And so this was a county-wide issue that really kind of came to a head pretty quickly. So when you all are here, when the permanent folks are here, when the influx of tourists are coming in, on a parade day, we may have an extra 10 or 15,000 people here. We don't really know the number because there's that many people. And we've used a number of things, but we know we have a lot more people here on parade days. We have a lot more people here on Art of the Park days. We have a lot more people here on every weekend than we do through the week. And so we've requested of the county to work with them, and the most recent development is the fact that the county has given the county manager and the town council has given myself permission to have an open dialogue together about trying to work something out. Maybe it's outside of the box. We don't know. We haven't begun those discussions. He called me earlier today, and I hadn't had a chance to call him back. But the overall goal is for he and I to sit down and hopefully start developing a plan that will help us as we move forward into the future, because we're starting to see, again, those upticks more than we've ever seen. And I think it's simply a fact that our town has become more and more popular. And I'm not here to talk about the tourism side of things. That's Roger Brooks and the tourism study. But hands down, I see the numbers. I see the TDA numbers. I see the ABC numbers. I see all the numbers at the town. And we, hands down, have more people in town this year than we did last year. We had more people last year than we did the year before. I don't know where that's going to end, if it's ever going to end. But with more people, there's more issues, there's more accidents, there's more things that need our attention.
First of all, maybe if I could just prerequisite, well, thank you guys for having me here. I was sitting over there thinking, even though this is a really, really complex issue, that was a great, I was following it, I think, and I think I got lost and I brought my way back there, but it's a very complex issue. But again, actually Amy leaned over to me, she said, well, this seems like a solvable problem, and it really does. And I encourage you to do exactly what you're doing. Coming out, listening, I'm learning some things as we went through this, and to have the open dialogue that you're just talking about with the county is, I think, the best approach. But let me answer the question. So Mr. Gupton was pleasant enough to give me a heads up on a few questions that you may have, and I want to just maybe walk through a few of those as I could. Obviously, I think the questions that I heard were around stroke and heart attack. I think that's what really concerns, I think, all of us. It concerns me. I have a history of heart disease in my family, and I'm always thinking about it. My dad died of a heart attack at 61. His dad died at 55. His dad died of a stroke at 70. So we have that history. I'm concerned with it, too, just as a person that lives here in the community. But let me get back to really the question at hand. I realize this has been an issue for 47 years. During that period of time, we've made incredible advances in medical treatment. And really over the last 5 years, we've made incredible advances in medical treatment at Appalachian Regional Healthcare System, and specifically Watauga. I'll share with a few of those with you. Specifically stroke and heart attack. Let me explain a little bit about what happens in most occurrences when you're having a heart attack. You have that, you activate EMS, they come. They have the ability to run an EKG, to start an IV, and then also give you aspirin. That's part of their protocol. So they're starting that treatment along the way. That EKG is very important because that's transmitted back to the hospital. Our physicians and cardiologists view that and say this is a STEMI. That allows us to go ahead and activate our personnel. And as soon as that person hits the door, they never stop in the emergency department. They go to our cath lab. And that's called our door to balloon time. And that's what we measure from the door in. And what we really pride ourselves on is trying to make that time as short as possible. And I want to share a few numbers with you on that. The national average is 59 minutes. Our average is 47. So we're 12 minutes better than the national average. Now that may not seem like a lot, but 12 minutes when you're having a heart attack can mean the difference between good outcome or a bad outcome. So I thought about that when we were having this discussion, and regardless of we live in a rural area and it's beautiful, but you're right, we also think about, well, if I live in a rural area, what impact is that going to have on my access to health care? Well, what we feel like is we just gave 12 minutes back no matter where you live, because if we're 12 minutes better than the national average, if it took you 12 minutes longer to get there, we've kind of made that time up, getting that relief to really your heart during that time. On stroke, it's actually a little bit better. It's 15 minutes. National average is 74, we're at 59. And that's time from they hit the door to actually we're administering what our most prevalent treatment is for a blockage is lytics, what we call lytics. We have to go through the process to make sure a stroke is not a bleed, because we would do more harm than good if we administered lytics and it was a bleed. So that's a little bit about what we've done on our side. We're accredited for both of those services. We've got teams organized, the medical personnel organized to really focus on streamlining that process once that person is identified as having a challenge that you're coming to Watauga Medical Center. So I know that may be off topic a little bit and off question, but I think that was one of the questions that you had.
What it illustrates is we have a good solution on the front end and a good solution on the back end. We just don't have a good solution in the middle.
Right. Yep. So, question for me? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have data for how many people from Blowing Rock come in as a coach stroke that goes to PTA, and how many come in as a STEMI that get the balloon?
Got some notes here. Let me take a
The rest of Watauga County. In other words, making the point, this demographic here. Also, Watauga County, that will help you go out and do something.
Yeah, let me see if I have that. So basically your question is those two things, stroke and
Yeah, for the really key things where time is critical, extending the coach strokes and from medical lytics. And I presume from mechanical, definitely you send them to the court.
yeah, I don't believe I have that data, but I can certainly get that back to Mr. Gupton and we can distribute that just to let you know. I don't have that in front of me and I'd hate to assume. I'm sorry I can't answer that, but I'll be glad to go back and make sure I have the correct data and get that out to you.
Can you repeat the question?
I think you were asking how many people from Blowing Rock were transported to Watauga with a stroke or a heart attack. Is that correct?
Not just chest pain, not just numbers.
Right, a true heart attack and a true stroke. Yeah. So I will get that information back to Tim or Tim.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, first of all, great information from all three of you and clarified a lot. But I remember once Deep Throat asked a question, follow the money. So I'm wondering, what is this contract with a for-profit that's holding it over our heads up? In Caldwell County, we have Blowing Rock carrying people to the hospital. I sleep in Watauga County and I eat in Caldwell County. My house is split, but Caldwell County takes me to the hospital. Blowing Rock can't.
Just call out that side.
I would love to do some research on this contract and see if we can work something out that way.
Yeah. Certainly, best I can, I believe. So from a Watauga and Caldwell standpoint, I think essentially followed the money. So Watauga has elected to outsource their transportation with Watauga Medics. Caldwell has an in-house county-ran system in which they utilize Watauga or Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue for their upper-end transportation of their Caldwell County. And so I will tell you, every county is ran different. Every county's budget obviously is different. The county budget in Watauga County, money is used towards that contract. And so there's a subsidy. And I'll get these are rough numbers. I'm not a county employee. I'm not the county manager. We'll say roughly $1.5, $1.6 million a year goes towards Watauga Medics to provide that service. In Caldwell, it's a larger county, so the number's larger. It's also an in-house RAN system, more bases, more ambulances, et cetera, that's out there. So it's not necessarily apples to apples. The end goal is service to service. You want the same service to be provided there. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier with General Statute 153, the state doesn't, and Representative Pickett's here as well, I'll acknowledge him in the back, the state doesn't dictate this service, and it never has. It dictates the services being offered, but it doesn't necessarily dictate the type of service. It allows the flexibility within the county itself to do so.
To add to your answer, when you look at the decision by the county commissioners to prioritize their priorities, their funding priorities, they've made a decision to limit the subsidy to $1.5 million a year out of their entire budget to provide only 4 ambulances for the entire county, which is huge. So to me, and we've had this conversation with Chairman Welch, Ron Curtis and I did, it's, you know, what is the priority of the county commission? They could choose to make that a priority or not, and they haven't. So if they're not going to do that, then the question for us is, how can we come up with a creative solution to fill that gap, and should we fund it ourselves? Yes.
So Shane, you had mentioned that the state statutes say that the counties provide the ambulance service. Do you think that there would be a potential to go to the legislature to change that to allow the Blowing Rock Fire District to provide our own and to withdraw from the county?
It's never been done. So not saying I can't answer that it can't be done, but it's never been done previously.
It would be easier for the Blowing Rock Fire District to do that than a lot of others, because so many people that live in the district or that have homes here in the district, pay taxes, don't live here. So there's a huge constituency throughout the state that's going to be getting knocked on the door saying you need to support this, rather than just the 2 representatives from here or whatever there are. And does that make sense for the Civic Association to push that through? Because I also think that if the county realizes that there is a mission to withdraw some of their funding, which may be a substantial amount of their funding, they may change their priority.
And one thing you need to know, I think factoid that I've learned is the district fire, that property tax value is $1 billion.
About $1 billion.
And the town's $1 billion. But the fire district is only taxed 5 cents, so it
Right.
only produces $500,000. The town contributes right at $1 million into this fire district funding, and the budget's about 2.2. So there's an inequity even within the fire district versus the town. So access to money, you know, there's probably access to money on the fire district side of the equation that could help solve this problem. But your recommendation has an interesting nuance, because you're right. A lot of people in the state live in Charlotte, that have homes here live in Charlotte, and the Triad, and Shelby, and lots of places. So the constituency is not just local.
So Shane, your knowledge is of all 100 counties, there are no situations where a municipality or a community has its own fire service.
No. I was responding to being forced to, essentially. So under the same general statute, a county can, by resolution, this is the statute itself. So a town, for Blowing Rock, we'll say, for example, the council itself could pass a resolution asking to have its own fire service. Funding varies. So we're funding it fully, we're funding it half, whatever the case may be. The county commissioners then can approve and also pass a resolution to allow that to take place. That does take place. And what essentially happens is what's called a franchise agreement. And rescue squads have had that for years and years and years in rural areas. And as those have started dying off, unfortunately, in a lot of rural areas, what's replaced it in most areas have been EMS services. Again, I can use Cleveland for an example, as Cleveland County had rescue squads at one point as many, I think, as 6 or 7, Bill, and Bill's was a Cleveland County resident. And now it's down to 3. What's happened, the county has placed bases in other strategic locations out in rural areas. But a franchise agreement through that resolution is absolutely a possibility. So funding comes to mind every time, right? So who pays for this is the number one thing, as our council discussed in the public meeting that we took place, I think, February 22nd of this year, was who's paying for this. So should the town pay for all this service? None of this service? The town's paying taxes, obviously, to the county. And I think that's another one of these pieces that comes in. An ambulance service. So we've ran the numbers in almost every way you can. So if we were to buy an ambulance in Blowing Rock and fully staff that ambulance, and that would require a little bit of overhead, that would require some billing and things of that nature, we'll use a number of $600,000. Now, you can make that as little as 5 something and probably as much as 7 something, but we'll use $600,000 a year for us to do that. And so, well, so Watauga would have to allow us to do that, and Watauga would have to allow us to do that, and that's where the arrangement would have to be put into place. If the town wanted to fully fund it and fully run it, it still would have to go through the Watauga County Commissioners to approve that. Right now, the Watauga County Commissioners approve a contract with Watauga Medics. That's the only transaction that takes place, is they approve a contract with Watauga Medics, and Watauga Medics provides that service. So that would also have to be into play in that conversation.
Is it right, or am I right or am I wrong? Did the county say that they were going to pay $300,000 a year toward if we wanted our own ambulance service? Is that right or is that right?
It is. So the offer from the county to the town was for the town to pay closer to $400,000, and they would pay for the 9-hour piece that's being paid for right now. So essentially, getting a credit for the 9-hour truck that's there, what cost they are currently paying, would come off of, we'll say, the $600,000 number. That would put the town more into the range of, say, $400,000 that could be paid.
So the town would have to pay $400,000, give or take a year.
Yes.
Plus buying an ambulance.
No, the ambulance would be included in that. It would be ran through Watauga Medics. That was a part of the agreement, was that Watauga Medics would add a truck, a crew, a 24/7 crew, and an ambulance. And so nothing changes on the county side other than they add a service, and the town would then fund, we'll say, roughly $400,000 of that service.
What they're saying is that the town of Blowing Rock, if they wanted to, $400,000 a year, give or take, and it'd be this whole deal for 40 years to be over.
Not necessarily.
That was voted down by the town council.
They still could use it for convalescent transport. They would not guarantee it would be here.
So some of the conversation, without getting into the full-fledged conversation, was who would have control of that. So if we're paying for it, who has control of it? It's not our ambulance, it's not our personnel. The quality of the individual, the quality of the service, etc. That was where some of the conversation led from the town council, is what are we getting for what we're paying for? And some would argue already paid for, so we're paying a second piece as well for that. But what are we getting in return for that? What say-so and what control measures are we getting? Who's to say that ambulance is not going to be taking a transport to Baptist and the 911 call comes in Blowing Rock? And so we never got as far as working out those details. Those were the questions that were coming up. Again, and the mayor would like to speak to that as well with any details. But
Can I make a couple of follow money comments? This wasn't really a problem until the late 90s, because if you had a problem in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, you called 911, the rescue squad came out, picked you up, and took you to the hospital. No charge. It was only until the new contract came in and the ambulance service realized that every time the rescue squad transported somebody at no charge, they were losing a lot of money. And you mentioned that we had 88 calls last month. If you look at the charges for 88 transports, you're talking at least $40,000 or $50,000 a year. If we had an ambulance service at Blowing Rock and we were charging for it, that would offset a lot of the costs. And I suspect if Blowing Rock started making noises about taking those calls away from the county ambulance service, they would suddenly find it profitable to put those to the Blowing Rock.
But you have to understand, the town can't make that decision. The county, right, they have to prove the ability of the town to take it on.
so just, I'm coming. It's coming. So Dr. Devant was essentially kind of the follow the money. And so saying in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s, rescue squads that were here, Blowing Rock had a rescue squad, Boone, Watauga, you had a lot of rescue squads in Watauga County. I'm not from here originally, but I know in Caldwell and others we had rescue squads almost in every little rural area. Rescue squads would transport those patients. When it really started going away was when the contracts were starting to be put into place, and the billing itself became a part of that. And so the billings from Blowing Rock is essentially, I think, what you're saying. The last, if you had 88 calls in the last 30 days, not all 88 resulted in transports. I'll say that, of course. But if you were to take, 100 calls, the average call is in today's rates are more like $700 or $800 per transport, I think. And I may be off a little bit within that, but that's $70,000 to $80,000 per 100 calls. And so I think Dr. Vant was talking more from a money standpoint. I do think it's important to note, and I didn't mention this earlier, I didn't as a part of this, was as a part of the agreement that was offered by the county, we would not have any say-so within the billings as well. So essentially, we would be a party to the contract that was with Watauga Medics. We would pay the $400,000, and that was it. So if you're getting into the in-depth of the town really having its own ambulance service and having its own billing and things of that nature, that was not part of the conversation. It was just here's the amount it would take to put an ambulance over there conversation within that.
$400,000 is analogous to the subsidy that the county pays to Watauga Medics, because essentially it's going into the same system.
Yes, the $400,000 number. The $400,000 number was help derived from the contract itself. I mean, the contractor itself helped come up with that number of what that would cost to provide that service to Blowing Rock.
So one of the fundamental questions is, even if we wanted to pay for it, we can't make it happen without the county's cooperation and an arrangement through the franchise agreement and the contract through Watauga Med. So it's complicated to solve, but it needs to be solved.
And I would add, just real quick, sorry, Barry, Watauga County is adding another 24/7 truck as of January 1st. That will give them 5 trucks. It will be located in Boone. It's my understanding, but I can't confirm that. It will not be at this point located in Blowing Rock, but that is on the work. So good news is, I mean, really truly good news is that another truck is being put in play. And so really, if you were to go down to the operations of it and ask Chief Graham, we need more trucks, is what he'll tell you. Do you want one in Blowing Rock? Yes, I've wanted one in Blowing Rock. But do we need more trucks just in the county to be put into the pool? Absolutely. So that's encouraging that we are getting another 24/7 truck within the county. I know you all want the truck here. We feel the same way, but it is encouraging we are getting another truck within the county. So I do want to make that note. The county commissioners have put that truck as a part of the budget for this upcoming year.
We asked Chairman Welsh to station it here because there's a space, there's a station for it. So there.
Yeah, Station 1 was built with a full-fledged bunkhouse and quarters for an ambulance service.
I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm reminded of how history repeats itself. In researching the history of Blowing Rock, I found on 2 separate occasions, leaders of this community approached Caldwell County requesting that we be allowed to become part of Caldwell County. The genesis for that at the time was not medical, but it was educational. Until Dr. Charles Savant became the chairman of the county school board, we always received less funding for our schools. And the citizens of Blowing Rock were very, very upset about it. We now see this same situation repeated in a different arena. But it seems in many ways, to me, as a taxpayer, taxation without representation in terms of what's going on. And I know the university is dominating Watauga County, but we're an important part of the county, and we have history being neglected. I share that with you as a historian.
And some of you have asked me before, what does Blowing Rock residents contribute to the budget from a property tax standpoint? Now, sales tax is a big unknown because in the way North Carolina collects sales tax, it all goes to the county, and the county distributes it out based on either population or based on property tax value. And you've all heard that argument and continue to hear that argument as well. We're fortunate right now to have it based on property tax value. But property taxes come to mind. The town of Blowing Rock contributes to the overall budget of Watauga County over $5 million in property taxes. Last I remember, that's about 12 to 13%-ish of the overall property tax value within the county. So we're not contributing half or a quarter, but it's still a pretty substantial amount of money. It's about 13%, I think. 12.7% comes to mind.
What does the university
Question in the back. Kitty.
Thanks, Tim. Exactly why isn't a representative from Watauga County Commission here to speak to this issue? It's really, our hands are tied. It's all up to them. So
They were invited.
I was gonna make that comment. They were too busy.
well, I'm sorry.
No,
but
one of them
paying this
showed
lot. Oops, we're not the deadline. Next month, I'm gonna be at the beach. No, stop.
Private ambulance.
Again, absolutely, the county commissioners would have to approve that as well. I know it sounds like a broken record, but there is, under general statutes, there is nothing that the town can do without having approval, whether that's ourself, contracted out, Caldwell, Watauga, every option that's on the table would still have to go through the same process through the county commissioner's approval. Yes, David.
Just one clarification. Given how rapid the response is from the Blowing Rock paramedics, and the amount of time essentially to stabilize a patient who's having an issue of some sort, what, other than transport, what can the paramedics not do?
So the question was asked, and tell me if I'm wrong, but if we're showing up with 11 of our 14 individuals, paramedic level, providing that acute care to that patient, what can't they do? Compare. There is nothing that our folks can't do that Watauga medics can do. We're on the same playing field. We have the same medication, the same training. Some would say we have even a higher standard of training somewhat. So we're on the same level. We simply can't transport you within Watauga County, though. They can't administer medication. The exact same medication can be administered by Blowing Rock Fire and Rescue as Watauga medics. Again, the issue is how long it takes for the ambulance to get there, and then for the ambulance to then transfer care from our folks to the ambulance, and then for them to transport you to the hospital. So when we clear a scene and the ambulance takes over the scene, the time it takes, obviously, for them to get there, clear the scene, and then transport you over is where really the discussion takes place. And then, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the chief here. We stress redundancy. It's important to have redundancy in these systems, and Watauga County is no different than Caldwell or any other county, is that you're always planning for these worst-case scenarios. And we've done that within the town itself. Watauga County has put a plan into place at Watauga County level. Our concern is we want more ambulances, need more coverage, is what we keep saying here, for those simultaneous calls, for those times in which we're busier than what we've seen before, because we are seeing, again, an uptick in number of calls, an uptick in number of people coming into town. Yeah, more people here equal more issues and more problems.
James,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think the bottom line is we get the detail. We know what the problems are. We need possible solutions. We can't get behind anything. We don't know what we're behind. And I don't know who's going to keep us informed, but we've got momentum. Look at the crowd. We need to see what process, who's going to take that responsibility. We'll get the word out, but how are we going to we need to see our options and get them on the table. Oh, 47 years, I'll be dead and still the same problem.
Well, to answer your question, Betsy, the mayor and the chairman of the county commission have asked the town manager and the county manager to negotiate and work on alternative solutions. So the ball is sort of in their court now to provide us with the county council.
We know?
Not yet.
No, but on your stages, how can we help you?
Right. You can answer that.
Okay. Ms. Sweeting, we need a shorter podium here. Ms. Sweeting and the other council members through the years have met with the commissioners. Ms. Sweeting brought back this offer from the county commissioners for $382,000 as an option for us to have transport, but many citizens said we don't want to pay for it twice. Okay? That being said, to answer your question, Shane and myself met with the county manager and John Welch 2 months ago, a month and a half, and they understand our concerns. Now, whether they're going to help us through these concerns and find a resolution, I don't know. But it did come down to, we'll let the guys that know how to crunch the numbers work out a plan. That would be Shane and that would be Darren. When they come up with a plan, then they're going to bring it back to our town council, which it will be public, and then we'll know what our options are. Are we going to spend $200,000 of tax dollars? Are we going to spend $800,000 tax dollars to get what we need? or will they allow us to contract it out? So now it is in Shane's and Darren's hands. We're letting them handle it. They know how to crunch the numbers. And then they can come back and address us and then come to you guys and give you the options. Is that okay?
I recollect correctly, this decision was made and not one public person knew that offer was extended.
Which offer?
The 392, less than 400. The public was not aware. There was no input. That town council needs to listen to the taxpayers.
Well, I agree with you. But keep this in mind. Many people, many citizens told me, why do we want to pay the county $382,000 when we're already paying them $2 million in sales tax plus? We feel like the county, or they said, we feel like the county should be providing that as a service, like they do in other counties in this state.
But for 47 years, they've done nothing.
Lynn,
You're right.
So five ambulances, 24/7 ambulances. So 5 ambulances on the road at all times, stationed in 3 stations. 2 are in the town of Boone. So one is over by the hospital. The second one is over by on King Street. And then the third one is a single station that's on the corner of 421 and 321 as you go to Tennessee. That station's been there for just a number of years, not many years at all. Outside of those 2 stations, or those 3 stations, there aren't any other stations. And so, yes. And not all stations, so only one station is owned, and I may speak of this, I think only one station is actually owned by the county. The other stations are owned by Watauga Medics as well.
so let me take one last question, then we're going to end the meeting, and then Shane and the mayor and I and the hospital executives can be here for any one-on-one questions that you have beyond this last question. Sue.
Quick Caldwell County question.
Sure.
So if the emergency happened at the Glowing Rock, which is in Caldwell County, would the person be able to be transported to Watauga Hospital or only at Caldwell?
Yeah, so I believe there's an option for both to be. I think you can be transported either way.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's where and please, and the hospital may know this better than I do. I believe it all happens in the location of the incident itself is what dictates who's arriving to that, not necessarily what hospital it's being transported to. Right. Correct. Blowing Rock is Caldwell County.
And would the ambulance come from Caldwell?
No, the ambulance would come from Station 1. Our ambulance would come.
No, the first responders would come from here.
No, and the ambulance. So, and I didn't, as I covered a lot of stuff earlier, so Blowing Rock Fire Department, Station 1, has an ambulance sitting inside of it, a Caldwell County ambulance that we operate. So Chief Graham may very well be the one driving it if you have an accident at the Rock and come and pick you up and take you to the hospital. We cannot do that within Watauga County. That is not allowed for us to do that within Watauga County. It is covered by Watauga Medics. So could an incident take place at the Green Park Inn on the Caldwell side and we show up on the Watauga side, we can't, and transport? The answer is yes, and that has happened before, where it depends on where the incident takes place is whether or not we can transport.
So thank you all for coming. We really need to stay on schedule. Thank you for your questions. Obviously, this is an ongoing issue, and we'll do our best to keep you informed. Thank you.